see you in person. Yeah, I'll start with the agenda. First, we start with our land acknowledgement. So I would just like to say that we are gathered here on the lands that were originally home to the Menominee and Ho-Chunk nations, that we honor the Menominee and Ho-Chunk communities and are grateful for their stewardship of the lands and the waters. We acknowledge these ancestral grounds as sacred and remember the complex history of settler colonialism on these lands and the effects that persist today. We commit to a restorative and healing relationship of the original inhabitants and our community. I would like to follow that with our mission statement. Oh, sorry, we do roll call. Most important part.
Lee.
Present.
Savula.
Present.
Lyra.
Present.
Winselberger. Yang.
Present.
Johnson.
Present.
Roberts. Hesse.
Present. Okay,
We
thank
have
you.
our new.
Oh, just, she has not. This is Saida.
Yeah.
Egal, and she is joining us today to just watch.
Be a
the-
part and share
be a
my
part,
ideas.
And,
Okay.
yes.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for
Welcome.
joining us. Okay, well, thanks for getting me back on track there, John. I
No problem.
appreciate it.
No.
Always a good reminder.
No.
So yeah, and then just really, I would like the mission statement, because this, I think, will also help further ground us more in the purpose of this group, and I think that's very important. The mission for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee is to create a more welcoming, connected, and equitable Oshkosh by consciously including the richness and complexities of marginalized voices in its planning and function. I appreciate that we added that back into our just kind of general practice of opening meetings. It was always in my mind and then loses it pretty quickly. So thank you, I think, Angie, or whoever asked us to get this back on a while back. It's a good reminder. Hopefully you all had some time to look over the minutes. Just kind of put it out to the group to ask if there's a motion to approve the minutes from February 28th.
I motion to approve the minutes. I move.
I second.
Any discussion or corrections or anything anyone found in need of change or amendment? If not, barring that, I think I would just kind of we have to vote to approve these in this?
Just all in favor.
All right, sounds good. So with that, all in favor of the
Aye.
approving minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
It's
Opposed?
a lot easier when it's not
All
remote.
right.
When it's remote, we have to be individual.
Right, this is a little easier.
This is good, that's good, yeah, there's a big difference. Emotions on the internet. All right, so with that in mind, we do have a guest here. I don't know if there's any comments, but anyone that has any comments that are, you'd like to issue to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, the floor is yours.
Great. So I like to come prepared. I am just one of those. So I've prepared a little something for everyone. If you'd like to have you and pass them that way. You're all alone over there. Okay, everyone have one?
Thank you.
Okay, so if you can clearly see it, it's right on the top right there. Fox Valley's Around the World Tour, presented by Oshkosh and everyone involved. So my envision is, personally, I come from a diverse culture. I mean, I'm Somali. I've lived in Boston, so I've grown up a lot of Puerto Ricans and Dominicans. I've lived in Egypt, I lived in Dubai, so my Arabic is fluent. So I have a lot of culture flowing through me. And so with all that being said, you know, this event would bring people together in a way that we haven't been together since the start of the pandemic. Things to include would be arts and language, which I think is very common. Kids would create art with other kids from all over Oshkosh, all over the Fox Valley area. And this could be then displayed at Menominee Park. language, learning words such as Sa'ida, which actually is my name. It means happy in Arabic. Ahlan, which is hello as well. Ni hao, which is Mandarin for hello. My brother's been teaching me a few words. So a few things that could as well bring us together. A culture walk. Sounds a little fun. So it's a walk around Menominee Park, you know, a little conversation starter. Do you like books or movies? Do you drink coffee or tea? Things to get people talking. One thing that I think we all can agree on is music and food, something that we all love. So music. Again, like I said, I listen to a variety of music. I could be in the car and I could go from English music to Arabic music to African music, and it's just crazy. And food, well, restaurants are great, right? You know, food trucks and all that good jazz, but a potluck, even better. A little bit of food from everywhere. You know, we have culinary students at Fox Valley, at UWO, and it'd be great so that everyone could bring a little bit of, I don't know, something to the table. Canada, all different parts of Africa, west, south, east, my favorite, because I'm from there. And sports, something I think we all agree is something that we can all do and, you know, have a lot of fun doing. Things such as soccer, which is very big amongst our foreigners, such as Arabs and Africans. Football, America's favorite, go Chiefs. And basketball. So and then again, you know, other games that kind of really all bring us together, yard darts, jump rope competition, hacky sack, which I have started to learn to play. And last but not least, I think something that really brings us together is a movie night. So a little blanket, popcorn in the park, you know, comedies such as Chaplin, and my favorite, which I'm sure none of you know here, is an Egyptian man very similar to Chaplin named Al-Rahani. So he's very big in Egypt. But I'm hoping that with the help of the city and this committee and many other participants such as UWO, Fox Valley, the police department, I mean, there's a list of things that could be, you know, we have the YMCA, and a little funny story here quickly, ethnic shop owners. So I moved from Missouri prior to coming from Boston, and my biggest issue was finding food that I eat, that my people eat. And so I would have to drive all the way to Milwaukee just to find something to, you know, to cook. And slowly, as I've lived here the last 2 years, I've started traveling to Appleton, Neenah, Menasha, and all the little closer areas that I'm driving, and I'm like, hold on, there's a store that says African or Caribbean, and I'm like, oh my God. So it'd be a great way for them to come out and show their presence for people like myself and other people who don't know where our shops are. So that's just a few of the participants that I could think of, but I really do believe that with a little effort and timing and participants to put some real work in there, that we could make it really epic and memorable for Oshkosh. And I understand that it was something the former mayor did, very similar. I can't remember what he'd called it. Didn't sound very worldly though, but Around the World Tour just sounds a whole lot more, you know, inclusive and fun. So I'd like to know what thoughts are.
The committee can't address any issues.
Yes,
Yeah.
at this point, that unfortunately we cannot, but it's something we can discuss and perhaps bring up
course.
for some future
Yeah.
open discussion, perhaps invite you back if that would be appropriate.
I'd love to.
But I really, I would just say thank you. Greatly appreciate it. It's a lot of
Thought and
that
effort.
we're working on. Yes, so really appreciate it and taking the time for coming.
Thank you for
Probably,
listening.
you probably want to talk to me because
So I've heard, I think Ms. Palmieri said that as well when we spoke.
we did a lot of the work to
I,
make unity and community successful.
yeah, we did in a community, not
Yeah.
not with this group here. Before the pandemic, we had put something together just exactly like
Exactly,
this.
yes.
Yeah, with the Nigerian community, the Congolese community here.
Yes.
We had something lined up similar to this, but boom, that pandemic
Exactly.
took it away. So outside this group, we've been trying to organize this thing for
Yeah.
this this summer.
I'm excited.
And I think out of this committee, we can work together with this stuff, yeah.
I would love to be a part of it, for sure.
Well, again, thank you very much for bringing this and kind of helping put it to the table, and
Yeah.
we're working up the muster to come on in, and, really appreciate it, so thank you very much. Okay, with that, I think we can move on to the next part of the agenda. I don't know if there's any public comments received or anything we have to report.
Not
Okay, I think that's probably a good thing. I'll take that as a sign. All right, the next thing on our agenda, on the item on the agenda, had to do with an environmental justice resolution that was put forth. It's kind of received a red line version for us to review, assuming for providing additional recommendations or any other comments on it. So with that, I'll just, I guess, open it up to the group.
Do we need to make a motion to do something to comment on this, or are we just commenting on it?
I know, as provide a comment on this, as far as I understand, it was for us to review, and if there is any comments that we have, I think we can discuss that and decide if it's something we wanted to share to it. I don't know who added these initial comments, but as far as, it was just my understanding.
I think it was drafted originally, I believe, by the mayor, and then the Sustainability Committee added these comments.
Ah,
my
that's
understanding.
right, that's right.
But then SAB asked, the Sustainability Advisory Board asked that DEI take a look at it.
Right.
But are they looking for us to actually approve it or support it? Do they need a formal recommendation from us that we should make a
I
motion to
didn't-
support it
I
before we
didn't
talk
read
about it?
that. No, they were just looking, this is before them to make that decision.
Okay, so
They
we're just
wanted some, if we have
We
any
are
comments.
truly strictly commenting on it.
Yeah.
That's it,
Okay.
just really advisory comments, suggestions, recommendations, additions, exclusions,
I think it's great.
whatever.
I was delighted to hear this and read it and go, yes, let's think about environmental justice.
Yeah, so I don't disagree. So again, yeah, this is just open for discussion, comments. If you haven't had a chance to really look through it, that's fine. We can kind of sit with it for a few minutes. But I would just say I totally agree. I thought it hit on a number of very important points. I thought, honestly, some of the recommended language changes seemed totally appropriate to me. I didn't have any issue with them personally, and it seemed to make sense, especially sort of the future potential concepts, for strategic plan and other funds. That's I thought it seemed to do a lot of things, and it was a good indication of the direction that not only the mayor would, but just really helping to bring this to the table as far as the strategic plan. I didn't have anything that I thought would.
Maybe it would help if the committee just did like an endorsement. It's sort of to your question, Anne Marie, just endorses it so that it's not, if you love it and you have no comments, then it's going to look like you didn't really like it. And there are too many positive comments here.
No, that's fine, go ahead.
I did have one question on wording. I am more familiar these days, instead of saying simply communities of color, using the acronym BIPOC for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Should we recommend using that, or is that too confusing to those who aren't in the field of DE&I?
I recommend anytime you use an acronym, the first time you use it, you spell it all out, you put the acronym in parentheses, and you're good to go. Because, because sometimes acronyms go out of,
We definitely do that the first time, and I thought that might be particularly important to include Indigenous since because we live in Wisconsin.
where's the first time?
Oh, yeah, I'm just wondering where you might be reading. I'm just looking today.
I don't see
I
BIPOC
saw it.
spelled out.
No, it's not in here at all. It simply says color, and I was wondering if BIPOC should be used instead.
Oh, well, the word, I'm just, I'm not sure which particular paragraph you're reading, but, you know, whether it should be introduced or not, I guess we could certainly discuss that. You know, they're using the environmental justice as it's defined by the EPA as a good reference, you know, all right, Civil Rights Act, you know, kind of, you know, same, just kind of generally using the federal language. If we wanted to introduce those concepts, I suppose we could make that suggestion, but I'd leave it up to the group, but by all means.
It's on page 2, the last paragraph. Page 2 of the resolution.
And
Is that what you're
again,
referring to, Anne?
Anne Marie, I think that's the first place, I hadn't, I think that's the first place. It's used a number of places. And I just wasn't sure if other people.
well, personally, I mean, it's an interesting thing, and to note that, because it is more contemporary, it's gonna be recognized by some. In the sense of these types of documents, just personally, it's also sort of loaded to the minds of others. And for something that is so, I think, important, and it meets the needs, I think, in the language, I'm certainly not gonna argue it. If others wanna add it, I think that's something we can recommend. But simply,
Need a microphone.
didn't stand
here.
out to me, but
To me, I think it'll exclude some people who are not updated in the language. You know, it gets a little bit confusing unless it's spelled out every time, because spelling at the beginning, you know, the people involved in the conversation will know it, but anybody after the fact will
Right.
probably be a little confusing to that. You know, I guess that term is not broadly, you know, understood yet.
That's what I was wondering.
Yes.
right. No, and I do hear you, Emery, and I think it is important, and it is a role that we could play to continue to just be part of community education and our events, activities, and maybe we could think about doing that for any future resolutions. You know, is there a series of definitions or terminology that we would prefer to see? I think, honestly, that might be an appropriate thing to consider. But whether we do sort of like, to Akeen's point for this one, we haven't brought it up at others, would we think about it the next time? I don't know, so.
I'm not.
I'm comfortable
tied
leaving
to
it, I hear you, but I'm glad you raised it, because I think it's an important, I never thought of it, it's an important point, and it's an opportunity. But for this purpose, I don't know, we just keep it to the general core of the content or substance of its intent, and
Yep.
if we're okay with it, like Mark suggested, just a general, hey, we're okay, thumbs up, thank you.
Maybe just making the comment that we're familiar with this term, and we think there might be something you want to consider as you incorporate this into other documents. So not saying what paragraph you put it in, just saying the concept's there, maybe talk about that way.
It could be, but I'll leave that up really to the group to some extent. So, I mean, do you want to have us insert a comment around this to the,
I don't think we need to.
anybody else have a strong opinion on it, like that we should or shouldn't?
Yeah, I think if we, in the future, start talking about that kind of language and terminology and how we want to include it or make it more broadly understood in the community, then we can go ahead then. But for now, I think we're good.
All right, well, maybe I just get, someone make a motion, or I'll make a motion to just, make it, I don't know, what, just generally
Endorse?
approve.
Indoors?
Endorse, I like that word.
Support.
Yeah.
Endorse and support the environmental justice resolution as drafted.
I second that.
All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right. I think, in general, yeah, that's why they asked us to take a look at it. Yeah, that'll be good, something to bring up again. The next item on the agenda is to approve draft departmental diversity, equity, inclusion, performance measures. I know we had some back and forth and a bit of time in between. Looks like you took some of our recommendations and moved them through some of the city departments for what it appears. And what do you know? We received a whole lot of response, I think, as far as an adoption of some, and perhaps would be some, it looks like, maybe they're already identified measures for the individual departments, and they're just sharing them with us. Maybe they're new, I don't know, but I, for one, just in general, was really glad to see these come forth. And it makes it, I'm just really curious to see if there's, anybody has any thoughts, or if we can make a motion to approve these, and then maybe have some discussion.
I move to approve the diversity, equity, and inclusion metrics for the city of Oshkosh.
Second the motion?
With that, is there, I'd like to have a bit more discussion perhaps, if anyone has any additional thoughts or feedback.
This might be a place to include BIPOC instead of people of color throughout the metrics. And I
Fair statement.
didn't realize, why is it only people in the workforce for gender and color and disabilities? I mean, that makes sense in the departments. But why citywide are we only looking at the workforce? I may have missed that earlier, but.
That's a good question, I don't think it's been raised yet.
And maybe that's because they just copied from the department metrics, but I should think we would want to know citywide what we have. Who's not working as well, and children, and those who are retired.
That's one of those things where we have the ability to measure that, and that's a challenge. These, it's measurable because it's, the data's available. The data's available about the workforce.
Well, for instance, I don't work for an employer here. I telecommute for a global company. How would you know that I'm in Oshkosh in the workforce?
Yeah, well, that's the point. We don't have that information. That's,
But
we want to try
you
to.
do know I'm a resident here somehow, don't you?
Yeah, but we don't necessarily know any of the details. We have census data that.
Yeah, that's what I was
we utilize.
thinking.
So what we do with this metric is we compare it against the census data to say, how are we doing with our workforce relative to the greater population? Because we want to move towards having a more diverse workforce. And I will tell you right now, the initial results are going to be not very good. And we have to acknowledge that. And that's I know there were some folks in the departments, well, our numbers aren't going to be very good. You are correct.
And
because-
that's why you want it specifically in the workforce.
Yeah, because we
Okay.
want to compare against this. We have done an annual citizen survey that we've, and the real challenge there was that while we had these great results, they weren't really representative of our population. We had, for example, we had a 98% return, 90% of our respondents were white. 90% of our population is white, so we're totally underrepresenting people of color. And so we knew that. So it's like, how do we improve that? So the workforce is just another way to do that, but we traditionally use that census data to be our metric. And we want to do that. And we had a great discussion on other things we need to do because we recognize that the institutions kind of skew the data as well. We want to make sure that we're reflecting that. So but we were absolutely going to compare that against our census data because it doesn't do any good if we just say, okay, we've got 3% of our workforce are people of color. That 10% is really the
Okay.
benchmark. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm glad you asked because that's, sometimes we make too many assumptions about,
Right. And well,
What we're
here we don't
thinking.
really want all the details of what is it compared to, but that definitely makes sense because also with the departments, it won't make sense unless you say it's like out of so many or compared to this or compared to that. So.
No, it's a good question, I'm glad you raised it. As there, and again, with that, Anne Marie, like, and everyone else, I do want to remind us that we've had an initial set of metrics that were presented. We found them inadequate, or to some extent, we were hoping for some more. We spend some time to give our feedback. And I do, as I understand, there are some budgetary connections to the, if I'm correct, and there's, I don't know if it's holding anything up, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I just know that in reality, we could probably continue this process indefinitely, and I don't think that's the point. So I know we are asked to either, to approve what's before us, and I am definitely open for more discussion, because I want to hear some input, but that, just want to just keep that on the table. That is what we're kind of on the table at this point. And if there's some other direction you want to go, we can certainly make motions to do so. Right.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Mark, John, how will you be reporting this information? Will it be like an annual report that comes out, or will that just be, do you have, what's the accountability?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll see
Okay.
if he has the same answer, and then I'm going to go, yeah.
Right. With our strategic plan now, we have a public-facing dashboard that we share all of our metrics that are already established for each department. So it would be our idea, if the group feels that this is something that you're comfortable with us moving forward, we would integrate that into our dashboard so the community can see everything and we can report on those. And right now, we update that as we can in a live sense, but we have formal quarterly updates where we update them quarterly. Now, some metrics aren't available that we have to be updated quarterly because we only get information maybe semi-annually, like some of the things in Public Works. But if we can update them more frequently, we will. But they would be available to the public anytime they want to see them.
As a follow-up, will we be notified of how, for example, people of color, the measure percentage of permanent employees, will we be notified of the methods that you use to try to increase that number, or, just any of these metrics?
Sure, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, ordinarily we have, and I know the group is going to be working on a plan that you think you'd like to implement related to DEI, but the way our rest of our strategic initiatives work is we have our plan, we have goals, and then under those goals we have action items to try to accomplish those goals. So when we look at the metrics and we see how they're performing, we can take a look at that and say, well, how are we performing in terms of our recruitment? Is it not what we want it to be? Are we hitting the benchmarks that we would like to see? If not, why not? And I think it gives us the ability, and this group the ability, to ask those questions. Why aren't we hitting it? Or maybe more positively, hey, we're crushing this. What are you doing? And, maybe we can replicate some of that in other areas. So it's part and parcel, I think, with the structure of our plan.
What he said, plus there was something that Ashley brought up earlier, and I think it's important to point out. You made reference to budget. The whole idea is if we need to apply resources to improve in some of these areas, it does have a direct budgetary impact because, if we're not performing in an area after multiple years, after 3 years, our metric of permanent employees of color in the workforce is still at 2% or something like that. It's eventually, when are you guys going to make movement on that? The only way you're going to make movement is to do initiatives. And what kind of things are you doing? And it may require, every once in a while, it requires a little money. And, recruitment is going to be, the real answer is going to be for getting our employees of color increases, do a better job of recruitment. That might require some resources, and then it would have a budgetary impact.
And I don't want to drone on too much about this part of the suggestion, but we always talk in HR about retention too, and it's important to recruit people to the organization, but if they don't feel comfortable or they don't feel like they're welcomed, then they're not going to stay. So I think it's equally important to look at how we can make people feel comfortable, and I think our guest illustrated to us having some of those components in the community where people feel comfortable, like where they go shopping or where they receive other services, is an important piece of that. So, these measures will help us get a snapshot, but, I agree with your question, Angie. We'll have to look deeper and see, why aren't we performing, or why aren't we recruiting and retaining people, so we can make those adjustments, take those action items and make them part of our plan.
I just want to say that I appreciate the changes because I think it reflects the optimism of the direction that the city wants to take. I do think that the problem is going to be compounded by the current employment situation, and how do you parse that out? That's going to make it difficult. But what I'm wondering, you're talking about this is going to be maybe noted quarterly. Would it be possible to maybe mention this in some fashion and, the State of the City report in some piece here so that, because I think this is important, and if it's moving in the right direction, we want to kind of boast it, and that would be a place that,
I would suggest, well, I can't change it in the next, 7 seconds, because it's going to come on in the
Right.
next 7 seconds. But one of the things I think would be great, when we return to live in person next year, which I'm really, really hoping, I would suggest a couple things. One, that DEI has we have a booth. We have booths for all the departments, and some of our boards and commissions also get booths. I think it would be great to have a booth for the DEI committee, and then we can talk about those there so that people casually walking around can see it. And I would be happy to find what good statistic to weave in to talk about. But it's more than just talking about the statistics.
Right.
It's saying, what are we going to do about it?
And I don't know if you were in some of the meetings that we had to put together the State of the City, but that's exactly what the theme is.
Right.
It's gonna be talked about tonight, is our strategic plan. So, it would be right on point to include that as you're suggesting.
And I think it'll fall into council when you do your retreat in May-ish, that we incorporate that, because then it becomes integrated, and we don't have a lot of reference to DEI stuff in our strategic plan. We added the guiding principle of equity and inclusion,
Right.
but it's putting meat on the bone.
yeah.
And we don't have much meat on the bone right now.
And again, I don't wanna, overstep my place, but, since you brought it up regarding, the plan, and also Ashley talked about the budget, I mentioned this in a previous meeting, but all the numbers might not have been there, and the departments know that if they want to get projects accomplished and they want to get projects funded, the way to get that done is to get it into our strategic plan. And I think the elected officials know that too, because we have a limited amount of money that we can spend, and we want to try to be focused and, be as efficient as we can be, which is why, the work with DEI is so important, and the idea of constructing a plan based on what you think we should do and things we should try to accomplish moving forward. We can use that same methodology then when we meet with the elected officials and department heads and construct the strategic plan. We can say, hey, this is what the DEI committee suggests based on their dialogue with the community, based on their own expertise. They'd like to see us work on this and this and this. So I think it would really help, in terms of the process that we use for the budgets, as Ashley was alluding to construct that plan, and then we can have more detailed dialogue about it, and hopefully, as Mark said too, provide funding for action. So,
I think the fact that conversation is taking place that says, our numbers are not going to be so good, that's actually already a really good thing. I think that's already moving in the right direction. People recognizing that and knowing that anything moving forward is going to be an improvement. So I think, I wouldn't
gave
be
a
too
little
concerned about that.
The departments were genuinely concerned about that. And this is the optimism that I give to them. I said, guys, it's hard to fall out of the basement. and I got that. And that's what I got. It's like, guys, there's only one way up. Let's do it.
I think that's true.
We didn't have to agree that much, but seriously, we got work to do. Let's do it.
I can add, I think, some of the departments were afraid. They were really afraid that, how is this going to reflect on us? But I think, Mark mentioning that, hey, we want to, honestly assess this, and you can't improve unless you talk about where you're at. And I think that really helped break the ice and, you know, allowed them to look at all the feedback that you provided to us and say, okay, you know, we can do this and we have to start and let's roll up our sleeves and, you know, get going on this, so.
Well, I will give credit to them for that.
I will pass that along.
Anne Marie, you have your.
Although this information will be on that dashboard, I can't imagine that each of us would want to or would have the time to look at the dashboard even periodically and try to find each of this. So I would like
Look at
to.
it all the time. I don't know why you won't.
I would like to request that we get a report at specific dates, whether that's once a year or twice a year, that gives us these 5 to 7 items from each department so that we know what they are and we know that we will be getting it.
Operationally, just so the group knows, I don't think that would be a problem. We have reporting capability that we could generate reports for you. So if that's something the group would like us to do, we certainly would be happy to provide that.
And I think when we get to the future agenda items, we can certainly just add that,
Yeah.
perhaps
Right.
maybe as one of our other standing or every other meeting, once a month, just, hey, any updates or a high level kind of a review.
And
I think that might
will
be-
that show us the progress over time, or will it just be a point in time? Because we definitely want to know like how we've improved year over year as time goes on. We won't just want to know today, because we want to know how does this compare to last year?
I think you need to show improvement.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Relative improvement. Because
Or
otherwise
if
it's-
there is an improvement, we would need to know that too, so that,
If it's a new measure, obviously, we won't have
Well,
that
yeah.
history, but
The
over
first-
time, yeah, we can do that.
okay.
When John went through the MPA program, the Masters of Public Administration program at UW Oshkosh, and they've been working with us on that annual citizen survey. We started doing it when I arrived in 2000, well, the first year of the survey was 2009. John actually was in the class his class did it for the 5th anniversary. And I was really excited about that because of that very point. You had 5 years of data to look at. And then you got something to look at is 1 year to the next. You may get some movement, you may not. 5 years really shows you, are you making progress? And after 5 years, and that was, Fitz wrote the part of the paper with his class, but it had some more substantive data. So we need to show that it's not just a snapshot. You got to create a moving picture out of a series of snapshots.
Okay, thank you.
Well, why don't we
Yeah, I would-
suggest, we will provide an annual report, I would say no later than April 1st. For the 2022, no later than April 1st, 2023. And I'm just gonna make that commitment because I think that's appropriate for this committee. If you want to build that into the motion, I'm cool with that.
You look confused, Ashley.
Oh, no, well,
Oh,
hey,
okay.
I'm easily confused, my face. I'm all over the map, so hey, no, yeah, the motion was just to approve, if we want to amend the motion to include with an annual report, you know, come April 2023, I think, you know, that's fine. But also just acknowledging, I would say that we can also, we'll get ongoing sort of updates, you know, as to how things are moving, not just, but yes, the more in-depth annual one. Yeah, I think, did I make the motion to?
You made the motion.
All right, so there you go, so,
You're cool?
yeah, that would be fine, we can amend it as such. But with that in mind, we've been discussing it for a while, I don't know if there are any other points. Yeah, Angie, please.
Under Culture and Recreation Departments, we have a reference to the Museum, Parks, and Library to diversify marketing materials and to measure enrichment education programs held, just highlighting diverse cultures. Are we going to be advising those departments to what is, because from what I believe, those boards are also not diverse, and something that they would like to do is diversify their boards, but will we be advising them as far as some of these metrics?
This would probably be more about advising the departments itself, because the boards, there are boards with each of them, but they're generally more about long-range planning rather than operations. So if, for example, the marketing materials, that wouldn't necessarily go to those committees for approval. That's something staff would do, but we can talk to staff about as we're doing those things, because I think there's value to it. And I know they're very receptive to that. I was real pleased that they read your stuff. They read the committee stuff, and I was so proud of them that they looked at it and said, we think we can do this. And so it's like, okay, cool. So I think they'd welcome input about that.
It sounds like more, because this is just a metric, so they might be looking at, well, 2022, all our, 90% of our marketing materials were white people and 10% were black. In 2023, we now have 80% white people, 10% black people, and 10% something else, and that matches some way on how that matches to Oshkosh
Right.
residents. So that, it may be that sort of metric, not that they're, so it'll just be strictly the metric piece, not.
I understand. Let me clarify my question. For number 5, under cultural awareness, measure enrichment education programs held annually specifically highlighting diverse cultures and individuals. Is that something that our committee would advise on as far as what's being highlighted, what's, like if they're considering programming and whatnot, who are the decision makers, and will we advise on those?
I could talk to Sarah Phillips, our new museum director, about how she would approach that in terms of getting some thoughts from you. She already has a great relationship with the Menominee tribe, which is why we were able to do the powwow last year, because of that relationship. And a lot of it's about developing relationships, and I think there's value that this committee could offer to help connect with other groups. We got a great relationship with the Menominees, but are there, how are we doing with the Hmong community in terms of our history and everything? So yeah, I'll talk to Sarah about that.
And Angie, you raised an important point, but I would also just be the one, just because it's my nature, somewhat contrary, and just to put it out there, cautionary for us to get involved in some of that, just at the risk of neglecting other areas, being favorites over here. Maybe it's something we do once and the seats change and we aren't able to doing it again. But I do think it's an important point, though, to build the relationships at the same time. So it could be that we would want to invite, maybe the new director or somebody from the museum, or if there are other things you said, maybe
Just like you guys did
bring
with
back-
Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff back from the library or a thing where we have we could have some focused discussions, because I think it is a valuable point that you raised for sure. But I would just, maybe Joaquin raised it earlier too, sort of, I think, the same spirit of adding BIPOC, like, I want to just be cautious as to how we pick and choose what it is that we're doing for these aspects, but what you're bringing up is very important. So I think, again, maybe that would be good cause for us to invite them back. And I think finding personally just some of the response we saw from the library, and then again, I think as evidenced in seeing what was written here as some response to our feedback, I think, again, it might really behoove us to continually try to engage in that sort of a collaborative effort with the city departments and the bodies that are represented here, because it ties specifically to the strategic plan for so many other reasons. I think, I'm glad you brought that up. It's just making me start thinking. But I do want to bring us back to the motion to approve these with that inclusion of annual report on April 2023. But is there any other discussion or comments anyone has around these metrics? Before I would kind of put this to a vote then? I guess we just kind of open it up then for a vote. All those in favor, or should we just do it one by one for the sake of the record?
Like, for this one, I think that'd be a good idea, yeah.
Yes.
All right, maybe roll call then for the vote.
Lee,
Aye.
Zabula,
Aye.
Lyra,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Hesse.
Aye.
Ayes.
Thank you very much.
No, I really appreciate
This
it.
was-
Thank you. Like,
Sometimes the process gets a little, hectic, but, you pound a lot of steel and you forge it and it comes out as a good product. So thank you. This was very good for the departments. I can't tell you how much your goals demystified some of it. It really helped. So thank you so much for all of your input. It's very valuable.
Well, that's good, I appreciate it, and I tell you, I'll always be one to just kind of stir the pot if I can. So, for the record.
Put that down.
Just for the fun. No. All right, well, thank you all. The next item on the agenda is plan development. We had some discussion, that kind of touched on that earlier. Alonzo was hopefully gonna be able to join us. I don't know that he's going to at this point.
Right, and he had a lot of travel that he needed to connect. I think he was in a
Yeah.
different state today,
Yeah.
and so unfortunately, he wasn't able to connect with us.
Yeah, but with that, I don't know, I can say this. This is, I know, been something from the start that's been at times confusing, may still be a bit confusing, also somewhat contentious, I think, as to whose role, and sort of, there's still maybe a little lack of clarity, at least perhaps in my mind, I'll acknowledge that, as far as the cart before the horse, who's doing what, under what authority. But I think the more we've discussed this, as I'm understanding it, and I think now having some metrics to work with, knowing that these are some key metrics that the city and the departments are gonna sort of utilize, knowing that we have the opportunity to tie those metrics to perhaps some specific goals, like just making sure we can close the loop to what we know is happening for sure. There's still enough unknown about what direction and objectives and targets they, parks or the city or police or fire have, but that's okay. I'm just gonna put it back on the table, just perhaps for discussion and just like, just to share again. I know I've shared with some of you, you know, over this 2 years, it seems like, to be honest, we've been running around this. It seems to me structurally, I would like to just put this out there, we would utilize the city strategic plan, right, as the, say, the basic columns of which we're going to target our goals and action items, you know, and recommend to the city. I would, to me, it would make sense that whatever we do, we start to look at those specific strategic goals of the city, and then, you know, look at what we've been asked to provide input on, you know, housing, quality of life measures, other things that we may have an interest in, but I'm just thinking we need to really tie whatever goals that we're gonna, you know, come up with and any potential action items as far as the plan, to the city's existing strategic plan. Just, I know if you mentioned that, I think with Alonzo, I've bounced it off a few other folks, it seems to make sense. Absent that, sort of, we still don't really have a formal way of working with Alonzo, even though I believe he was hired to, or was brought on to support this specific task. So I guess two things just to consider. To me, it seems, I think if we should work within the framework of the strategic plan, I'd like to discuss that perhaps. And then I would like to have a better understanding maybe how it is we're supposed to formally engage with Alonzo when we say have had at least 4 of us that have had an interest. And I know, Mark, you've suggested in the past, hey, just do the work and you kind of figure out the noticing and all the public kind of appropriate, you know, posting of any meetings beyond the X number of people. But it seems to be enough of a, I don't know if it's a fear factor or sometimes a hindrance. We just don't have a smooth way of really engaging with Alonzo, or even with amongst ourselves, it seems, outside of this group, you know, and it's been a real challenge to get some legs under this, even though I think we have a potential structure and we have some ideas and other examples. You know, we brought Alonzo, we were hoping he could really help move that along. So to date, it's been a little difficult for whatever the reasons, his schedule, not even knowing how we're supposed to make a request of his time necessarily. Who does it have to go through? So there's some process things there that I still think are hindering it. And so those are kind of my 2 major points, working with Alonzo and then sort of structurally, I think, tying it to the plan. But I don't know if others have thoughts, or maybe you want to just start with those 2 points. I'm open to anything. We have a bit of time for sure. It's something we need to get addressed. No pressure.
Are we on a round table discussion here what we could do?
Yeah, for plan development, you know, it does tie to, it's just, yeah, it's just sort of round, I don't have any
Point nine.
formal approach, you know,
Point nine, not
to
quite.
discussing the plan development, obviously, so. Aaron,
I guess I would agree, and to be bluntly, I think that he needs to be at these meetings if his role is to be helping us develop this plan. And I don't know what stipulations, whether there was a contract or what was written into that, but I just think if his purpose is to help create the committee's plan, help facilitate it, he can't do that if he's not here. So I think that's kind of separate, but it is important. But I do see the value in working without him. Since he's not here, we can't just not do anything. But I will put it bluntly that I am unsure as to why, and he wasn't at the last one, I believe, as well, at the last DEI meeting. But I would hope that in the future he will be at these meetings. So that was just my 2 cents on the matter, though.
well, thank you, I appreciate it. Yeah, John, please.
I can maybe help clarify some of the questions that Ashley brought up. I think, you know, one way to work on the plan is to dedicate a portion of your agenda, maybe a larger portion of your agenda to the work on the plan. I know that Michelle establishes the agenda based on input from the group and also meets with Ashley. But I think, you know, just making a concerted effort to just focus on development of the plan and having Alonzo be dedicated to being here would be a way to do that. The cost for Alonzo is coming out of Michelle's budget, so she'd be the person that can approve that and formalize that. And I think it would be a matter of just starting the process. I'm responsible for facilitating the strategic plan for the city and all the departments, and it's not really that complex of a process. If I can facilitate it, anybody can facilitate it. So it's just a matter of establishing a starting point, talking about what sort of information you want to try to gather, and creating a framework, talking about the goals, and then populating those goals in terms of how you think they need to be achieved. I know there's been a lot of dialogue about outreach and communication. We had some good ideas and some actually actions that have taken place already in regard to placing articles in the Herald. I mean, those are fabulous. But I think just creating that structure, saying, hey, these are the items that we'd like to work on and have be part of our plan, maybe even mirror them to the city's plan, you know, as Ashley talked about. So it would just be a matter of just kind of rolling up your sleeves and in this meeting structure saying, okay, let's just talk about what sort of structure we'd like to have in our plan. And just asking everybody and then having that dialogue and crunching through it. And it doesn't have to be as formal and scary as the ordinary meeting does. It's just a matter of dedicating a segment of time and going through it.
No, fair enough, and I appreciate that. There is a way, and I know it's something we will have to do, in part, but it's not gonna get the job done unless you wanna wait another year and a half, 2 years. I mean, it's just, I mean, but that is true. It is something we can do, and we've had this on the agenda from time to time, but I do appreciate that, John.
Sure.
It's just a practical
Yeah.
purpose, and we can commit to it, but I do know that it wasn't in everybody's general interest. Some folks really had a stronger sense of wanting to participate, and others are kind of like, I couldn't care less. I got on board because I really want to do community events and get things organized there. You know, we all had our own strengths and interests. So out of respect, I know we had also tried to find a way to do some work outside of this. But I think, I will just say this, and I know Michelle's not here to respond, but I will just, for the record, this is not a new discussion. We have had this, we have asked her, she has been present. I speak with Alonzo, and he's not here, but he's equally sort of like, I'm not really certain. So I don't really know exactly what was spelled out for him or what, but it might be time to really revisit and see what we can do to have something a little more formally thought out. You know, even a dedicated number of hours per week for us to work with, just so that we all have some framework to work on it. I would appreciate that. So I don't know if there's, you know, John, if you can shepherd some of that to Michelle.
Absolutely,
That
sure.
would really be appreciated. But I guess we do have some time, you know, others, if you have, excuse me, thoughts or ideas on, you know, how, well, I guess number one, I'd be curious, who even wants to do some of the heavy lifting of this, quite honestly? I don't have an expectation that everybody has any interest in doing this, because it's really kind of, frankly, kind of boring work for some, and it's also extremely exciting for geeks like myself, you know, so I'm okay with it. But I don't know. I'm really kind of at a loss as to where to really start, because we don't have a structure, we don't have a framework yet. We have maybe something to mirror it off of, but
My suggestion would be to ask Alonzo, what would you do? What would you recommend we do? And then just,
and we, you know,
Did that
we
a
have
few meetings ago. It was one you weren't
I
at,
wasn't at,
Ashley. I
yes.
don't remember what date it was, but he told us what we needed to do at that meeting.
There were, I will have to revisit some
Was?
conversations I had, but I know, and I think we had, there was something around 3 topics, you know, and generally, this is kind of, it came down to, because of our collective, I would say, I'll just own it myself. It was in part like, not really sure, like, okay, we can come up with a plan, but it's strictly an advisory thing. Nobody has to do anything with it, you know, and so, like, there's a part, well then, okay, that's true, but what could we do to have the most impact? So we started looking at, you know, community outreach and that. So we're looking at, I know, the city website, like, just publicly, like, well, what do we have that we can advise on, you know? And I think it was some of the outward-facing materials that the city had. So I think that was one of the areas he had suggested maybe we look at. It's just like, all right, how do we connect to the city? And we're asked to have public input on this. Number one, I don't even know how you found our committee, so thank you for doing your investigation.
A lot of research, a lot of research.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
A lot of
So-
talking.
So that's another part of it, like, from maybe those 2 lenses, I'm remembering, he had suggested, like, how do people even reach and connect to the DEI and understand what we're doing? You know, so for us to start thinking, what can we do to provide some advisement or guidance to the city on that? How, you know, what is from the city's perspective or from our perspective, just looking at the city's webpage, as an outsider or a newcomer, or even a longtime resident, what is that, what advice do we have, and what could we maybe start focusing ourselves on directly, maybe just on those 2 aspects? And I'm pretty sure that was a couple of recommendations he had, but there was a third one, but I'm not recalling it. But I would just say, maybe just for us, for right now even, those to me, I think, might be 2 concrete areas that we could just, you know, from now until next go around, and obviously in between, I think we can set up a Google Doc maybe to just drop some ideas in, and ask Michelle to create maybe just even a spreadsheet or a chart for us to just drop in ideas. That would be really great. But maybe looking at those 2 areas, from how do people connect with us, and what can we advise on anything in that area, and or if Oshkosh and our charge is to help make the city a more welcoming and inclusive place, well, what are we doing now, we being our part as a city representative here, like, to make it a connected, welcoming, and equitably sort of an inclusive place, just by using what's there. Like, all right, we have a website, you know, there's a lot there, but is there ways that we can improve that? Those are my 2 thoughts, and I think that was somewhat of what Alonzo had somewhat recommended, if I'm recalling, but.
Can I
Aaron,
give
please.
my perspective just as a council member?
Absolutely.
The way and a member of this committee, but I guess the way I see this plan is generally the direction and the goals of this committee. And I guess first, my question maybe, and you don't have to answer this, but to get you thinking is, you know, why did you join this committee in the first place? You know, is it because you were very passionate about criminal justice reform, maybe about, you know, certain underrepresented communities? So I guess I see it as, like, what do we as a committee want to tackle? You know, because obviously we can't take on every issue, but maybe there's a select few that we really want to focus on. And from my perspective as council, is this plan is what's going to help guide my direction. You know, so if I see, oh, this committee really wants to tackle criminal justice reform, how can I, as a council member, you know, work with them to get that done? So that's kind of where I see the action part of it is, you know, yes, you're an advisory committee, but you're advising council. You know, we pay attention to these things, and part of it's like we only have a certain amount of time to do things. So it's like this committee really wants to do a certain thing. You know, that's where I'm going to put my focus on. So that's kind of my perspective, and I hope that helps guide a little bit. But I guess to get things rolling a little bit, I would just like to see like what does this committee want to do in terms of like its goals, like, and maybe that's just a matter of kind of how we did the metrics, where some of us just came and like, I'd like to see this metric. Well, these can be a little more broad, more general, because it's really what we want to do. So it's like if everyone on this committee is very committed to environmental justice, like we had that resolution, maybe that's one of our goals for this year. Maybe it's something to do with criminal justice reform. So those are just some of my thoughts. But I'm at least looking at this kind of as a guiding for council to move forward on, you know, the initiatives that this committee cares about. Does that make sense?
Thank you for that clarification, Aaron. I want to remind the committee that over a year ago, we created a DEI committee projects master list, and this has been floating around on our Google Drive. And in it, we have all of our duties listed, so I've got our original ordinance. So we've got, our first 3 duties: 1, serve as a resource; 2, facilitate input from all geographic areas of Oshkosh; and 3, to educate the public about diversity, equity, inclusion. Under those duties, we have listed from our members different ideas. So we have all of this already out there. And then duty 4 was what we're discussing, plan. So I think this is my understanding of this, is the reason we haven't gotten to duty 4 is because it's been really unclear for us, like the equity performance measures for each city department developed by each department and approved by the committee.
Just did.
Right, so we could not do duty 4, point A, because we never had those equity performance measures from each city department. So now that we have that, we can get started on that portion of the plan. And then B, additional resources necessary to achieve said goals. And I think we can come up with a list relatively, between GARE, GDEIB, we can have those resources. C, information relative to community diversity, equity, inclusion to share with the general public and underserved populations. Again, I think we do have the structure, but really we were waiting on these city metrics to get started on the plan. As far as duties 1, 2, and 3, serving as a resource, facilitate input, and to educate, we have a master document here that, with many ideas that I would hope that we can, get started on. But I think part of the hiccup has been, how do we share this? What is our role? Like, what is the budget? How do we, we can, lay this all out there, but, I think, we've been kind of stuck on who's responsible, who do we share this with, and, how do we get things rolling?
And whether we take a role in actually doing something like, do we run something like this, or do we just say, yes, we support something like this? And that's what we haven't really known how.
Well, I think my problem all along has been, we have how much? 12 months in a year, right? And we meet once a month, right? So we're gonna have 12 meetings, right? With this enormous work that we do voluntarily, right? I know we are tasked first to come up with this plan. And after we've done it correctly, that's when we're gonna have somebody hired as a permanent kind of a coordinator or something like that. But I feel like some of this hiccup is we don't have somebody, like a leader, We are scattered all over the place. I believe if we had a leader around here, leading us in some of this stuff, I think would have done a lot. Look, it's almost 2 years, right? It's 2 years right now. Out there in the community, people feel like we are not moving. We are so slow. Mostly because they don't understand how government works, right? But for some of us who've been here now, we have understood it's always step by step, getting some of these things to work. But outside there, they feel like, oh my God, there's nothing going on. What is GI doing? So I don't know, maybe we have to rethink how we are doing this thing, because we are taking too long. This is just my comment.
I agree with you, and I think about, the most valuable thing for me is my time, and I am willing to throw in a couple hours a week to do the work. But it seems to me that we meet once a month and we have these discussions, and every time we meet again, we rehash the previous conversation, and we're still kind of, and we have done some work. I'm not sure how that's come about because it seems to me that we're always, trying to figure out how we're going to end up doing our strategic, our plan. But
Yeah, what I see is like this work that we've done so far, it's so good. Everybody has put so much input into this, especially these metrics right now. It's been back and forth. That shows like we are serious what we are doing. Whether it's us on the committee here or the staff, we've been busy working so much tirelessly to get it done, but it has taken time. Why has it taken time? Because of the same thing that I'm talking about. Feels like we are scattered. That's what I'm keep on circling down. I think we needed somebody to guide us. And even when we get to that position where we have somebody, kind of like a paid staff, I think that will be somebody accountable to make sure that some of these metrics really, how they can be realized. If somebody can be there every day and make sure that things are working. And I feel like that person would coordinate nicely with us in our efforts. That person would guide us. Can you imagine Alonso right now? If he was our DEI coordinator right now, we could have done much,
I appreciate you, Angie, bringing up the document kind of pulled together a long time ago. I forgot we kind of made that early on, and we took time to populate that. And that was really to sort of suss out the initial confusion in sort of the original charge. And to your point, Aaron, I appreciate you bringing that up, and you mentioned that before in regards to us sort of getting our own interests on the table, but that doesn't really fit to some extent with what and how we're interpreting the language here, and that's sort of always been one of the hiccups and challenges for us. But I think we've got enough clarity now to understand. I would still love to do that. I think there's an important role for us to make sure that our interests are met here individually, but just starting to get this initial piece done, it has been difficult, and I think Moshe, you bring up that point, and that having a DEI coordinator or somebody, in October, I think 26th of 2021, I believe, during a proposed budget amendment or some sort of, there was an actual proposal that went before council that was not approved, to hire a coordinator, even part-time, to fill the role of DEI coordinator. Because I believe, from my understanding, it was sort of didn't really think there would be something for that person to do, and they couldn't really justify the budget, and how would they pay for that position. But I think what you're mentioning, Moshe, is absolutely spot on. Personally, not only for once we have a plan, even these metrics, and to really develop, as I see it, as an internal level of expertise that has that trust to work with the departments to really carry forward the metrics and improve and to meet the goals that we're trying to achieve, I think is going to be an important one. And I think absent having that position personally, it is going to continue to make this plan development a slow moving process and somewhat tinted, depending on who's able to put in the time at any given point as a volunteer body.
One of our goals for the year could be to talk the city into.
Maybe one question I would ask maybe John or Mark, do other commissions have a person at the city level, like a hired staff?
No,
They do not have.
none.
No, commissions don't have staff. The city staff are the ones who support. So in this case, Michelle, and a committee like this, for example, Plan Commission. Plan Commission doesn't have hired staff. No board or commission does. But we have a planning division, so the planning, it kind of makes it easy.
The library board only goes to the library. The
I don't think any of
Parks
those-
board only goes
you
to
would
the
have
board. We don't really have a unit that we directly advise. We advise.
Because it's all encompassing, SAB has the same challenge you do. Because it's not any one department, it's
Sustainability.
everybody.
Every department.
I'm sorry, thank you. Acronym, shame on me. But yeah, it's having that, it's not a dedicated staff, it's easy. Museum board, they've got because it's very direct.
All direct, yeah.
This is all encompassing, so is the sustainability board. But I think part of it was that the hiring of Alonso wasn't the person identified at the time. The idea was that Alonso do that, and maybe what we can do to get to get that off of dead center is ask Alonzo what suggestions you have, because what I've been hearing you say is you really want a strategic plan for diversity, equity, inclusion. That's what I'm rephrasing a lot of what you've been saying, but it seems like that's, and I was probably influenced because Aaron's pulling up her strategic plan, and I pulled up Mouche's. When you were giving us suggestions for metrics, you really were giving us goals. If you take, and I would encourage you to go back and look at Mouche's materials. He was really it was really goal oriented, and it's like, well, there's your, I mean, these would be, if we were doing strategic planning, these are types of things that would get tossed out there to say, hey, I'd like to, and you brought up marketing materials. That was Mouche's number one. And so it was like, okay, and is that a goal? Yeah, it's a really worthwhile goal. And so then you prioritize those, and amongst those, then you say, okay, are there any categories in here? I think you were trying to get at, Aaron, can we put them into each of our strategic plan goals? If not a priority goal itself. And I wouldn't rule that out either. Make that something that we can focus on because it covers everything. I think Alonzo has that ability. I think he's been looking for the green light to go ahead and do it.
How do we get him? That's the question. Because
Get on his schedule.
Michelle
for every
can schedule
fourth
him
Monday.
for what you need.
that would
She's
be,
the person, she's the contact person.
I think there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of information.
Right.
I just wanted to put it in context, and some
Yep.
person with expertise is to help us, start to make a roadmap with this, but we don't have access.
And I know a variety of the committee members have talked about having a permanent DEI coordinator like other communities have. The idea is that Alonzo will be a stepping stone to that. And hopefully we can work with him, create the plan, identifying the plan, the need for the coordinator and why, and what that coordinator is going to do based on the goals of this group after you've interfaced with the community. And then that case can be used when this position is competing with other positions that are going to be requested. We can say, this is a need for this position, and this is why, because we have all these goals we want to accomplish. And then when it's evaluated by the council with all the other positions that are being requested, I think it'll be favorably received. That's been my experience in the past when staffing has been considered.
I would hope that with the product from this group, the city would actually be looking to hire their person instead of us trying to push it. That would be, because it's their role. It's
Absolutely.
So, but I think, we can keep on going the same direction but not get anywhere. I believe that if we can actually have this consultant help us get our feet in the ground and start having some direction, I think we'll be a lot more effective. And I'm not, and then the city can then decide, yes, we need to get someone to coordinate this and to make it a broader idea. So
It's a classic chicken egg discussion, do you get the position first, or you get the plan first? And I think the council was like, get the plan first, but we need to give you some support. And it's more than just the city staff that are not specialists in this area. And Alonzo is. And I guess, Ashley, you mentioned something earlier about something I'd said, and I'm going to throw that out again. In my opinion, I think it was council's intent that if this was the entire committee's work. But there may be some value to pulling a couple committee members to just sit down with Alonzo and would just roll up our sleeves and prepare to meet with the committee to have some substantive discussions. You may need to do that more frequently than once a month, because once a month deals with get once a month results. Yeah, I think that's kind of what you're lamenting there, Musha.
Right.
But how can we with open meetings? We don't have enough.
Here's how I would view it. Let's just say we want 2 people to go do this. We'll call it a subcommittee of DEI. We'll notice it just like a public meeting. And if people want to come in and watch us make the sausage, have at it.
All right.
We don't have to
Yes.
televise every public meeting. We have to
Right.
notice every public
Right.
meeting. I have no
They're
problem.
not all public if it is just, if it's what, 2 people?
Well, no, not normally, but if you call it a subcommittee,
I'm not calling it a subcommittee, I'm calling it a meeting. I'm just calling somebody on the phone.
As long as you're not.
Well,
I'm
we're
just
meeting with
making
Alonzo and
quorum.
working on it.
But so.
or another
okay.
way to do that, I could call Alonso and invite him to come and talk about preparing for our next meeting, and I can invite
I'm
a
I'm
couple
sort
of
of being
people.
a wise guy here, but here's what I would really want to request, because I do hear you, Mark, and I appreciate it, but we, again, to Joaquin's point, we've been circling this a while, and it's hard for me to get my head around it, and sometimes I have clarity, and sometimes I don't. I think I have a moment of clarity, so what I'd like to ask is this. Ask Michelle to get some formal, like, if it's not weekly, every other week, but we need to get a formal schedule established with Alonzo that could be appropriately public notice. It's just, this is where it is. And if there's a shift that needs to occur, I'm certainly capable, or the vice chair, whoever it is, to make that known to Michelle. But have her get us that, and it's gonna bring clarity for Alonzo and
Sure.
certainty, and it's gonna do it for us. And then we can start digging in, and we'll make sure everyone knows
Right.
that if you want to be involved or you have time, please, let us know. I would ask, because I would like to kind of wrap this up to some extent, because we'll keep going for a while. I don't want to respect everybody's family life and time as well.
I can do that, Ashley, no problem.
Okay. But I do want to just again reiterate, I think, in a previous discussion I had with Alonzo, he did suggest, like, why don't we really look at these access points for our committee? And let's, I would just put that out to us as just an ongoing charge. How can we improve and let's try to do it ourselves. And I remember, I don't know, it was like 20 clicks you got to go through if you're on target, to get to us. Let's figure out something, clever ideas, anything, bring that to the table. I'm just kind of mushing in
And
our.
if I could just add to
Please
your
do.
idea, Ashley, I think it's a good idea, and I would just so the committee knows, I hope that you don't feel like you're being held down, because, I think Mouché asked the question, do any committees have staff? And the answer is no. And you didn't ask this question, but really no committees have budgets either that are focused on their operation. But I would suggest to you that, with the exception of DEI is the only group that has committed to having a consultant help develop the plan, and correspondingly, then budget dollars have been dedicated to support the work of DEI. No other committee in the city has had that commitment by the city that I'm aware of. Mark can correct me if I'm wrong. So I just don't want you to get the idea that the city proper and staff don't support this, because we certainly do. We want it to be successful. The fact that we want to have Alonzo help and dedicate funding to support that, I think is evidence of that. So however we can make this happen through Ashley's suggestion and everybody else's, we're happy to do that. And I would also add, there's other resources that we can also apply to help with the assistance of DEI. We talked about, when we were talking about communication and outreach, Oshkosh Media is, we have 2 television stations and a radio station. We can use those resources to help convey information, messaging to the community, but all of it has to be through the creation of some structure,
Right.
But so don't feel like you're all alone. I think I get the feeling sometimes when I'm here and I'm not saying much, and I'm listening to everybody, that you feel like you're all alone. You have to accomplish this all yourself, and that's not the case. We're here to support you, and it's just a matter of, as Ashley said, getting some structure together and going forward with it. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I don't know. I mean, personally, yeah, I'm always feeling left out and alone, but
You're not alone. You're not
I don't
alone.
know. It's just part of the nature of the work.
Right.
And I appreciate you're making those
Yeah.
comments.
Sure.
I think, to me, it's the process kind of gets lost in translation. And now after a couple of years and starting to speak the language and understand it, it's like clarity comes a little bit. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, now we need to get some, a little more concrete as to how we're going to move about. So, but I don't want to give the city the idea that we're, flying over there by ourselves. That's not at all.
And even a starting point, and again, I don't want to direct the group or anything, but, you know, when Angie brought up the master list and those items that you already have identified. I mean, that could be the very starting point for your plan. You know, you've already identified those three as a focus area,
It is.
and then you
We
could
can- yeah, we just-
build beyond that. So you've already kind of done some of the preliminary work, I think. It's just putting it together.
That's true, and honestly, as chair and sitting in this seat for for as long as y'all let me, I don't know. I've always, it's like a monthly nagging thing. It's like, God, this is something I can see, I wanna get it done, it needs to be developed, but I don't have time or staff, and every time I think I'm gonna get to it, I don't. I would love, I mean, if y'all, I don't know. So anyhow, we'll get it done, that's all I wanna say. But I would like to, if everyone's okay, maybe move to, we touched on some, you know, a lot, roundtable.
Well, you had asked about getting a formal schedule established with
Yes.
Alonzo. We will do that.
Yes, that is.
And we'll contact you to get some ideas on how we prepare for the next meeting so that we have something substantive that we do, and we may have to dedicate a little longer, but I think that's what you want to do anyway, so. And with all, you know, this is a lame excuse, but I'm still gonna say it. This has been one of the most substantive meetings we've had, and I think being in person means a whole bunch. We can engage each other. It's just so pleasant.
So awesome.
It is. So, I mean, I think, because everybody's waiting in their little box, and it's like, is Mouche done talking? Can I talk now? Oh, I can't talk now. It's like, we're just talking, and I just think there's value to that free flow of ideas. So, I think we're gonna do. I think we're gonna be okay.
Well, I'm glad you think so.
I really do. I really do. And it's just nice to be with people.
It is. Thank you. But if we're okay, well, I'd like to just jump over to, item, boy, I've got a long agenda.
Have to make it.
10. Holy man.
This is-
So just sort of a round table, we wanted to add this to the you know, it doesn't have to be long, but are there anything that the committee members would like to share, events, updates, activities, things in your mind? No order, but just, it's kind of open round table if anyone has anything you want to put out there.
I'm indeed the committee for the county for diversity, and monthly we've been having these meetings where there's presenters and people speaking about their experience in Oshkosh, and it's been a good, and it's via Zoom, so and it's open to people, but it's a good experience. You know, Dr. Chassi came and gave a speech, you know, gave her history a couple of months ago, and then there's someone else the last month. So those are good places for the community to listen to people who are experiencing Oshkosh from their perspective, from not being from Oshkosh.
Now, that's interesting. So to me, John, you just mentioned we have a city television station. I mean,
Two of
how
them.
How do we elevate and rebroadcast and, you know, elevate those things? If they're already out there, are they recorded, I'm assuming?
Yeah, it's done via the county. It's done via the county. Yeah.
I'd say in your
County
plan, under communication, you
Alright,
could
there we
say
go.
outreach, and then you could say one of the action items is, we're gonna rebroadcast cultural information from surrounding communities. That would be an action item to accomplish the goal of outreach and education.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. Thanks.
Sure.
Anybody have other, or anything else you?
No,
I just have a question here.
Yes, sir.
We are on the round table, just the discussion, because this is coming up soon, right? When is this coming up?
Just my own ideas.
It's an idea, not a date.
It's-
Okay,
it's-
so-
It's just, yeah, right now it's.
Just my own idea.
Concept and enlisting support.
Support, okay.
But I will say, I thought to myself, if no one will back me up, I'm sure I can do it on my own with the amount of connections I have. So
Well, great.
determination.
Yeah, but I just want to find out, like, you want this to happen over this summer?
I would love for it to happen. Yeah, and towards the summer. Yeah, great weather.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think, Angie?
I propose we add it to our future agenda.
Yes, yes, I think we should.
I was waiting for you to say that.
Yeah, let's put it on our agenda.
sure.
Excellent. And yeah, please, you know, I think it's just a round table of ideas, but again, if you have future agenda items, you can just, I'm comfortable smashing it all up, so. Anybody else have anything that they may wanna share, or?
I'd like to share that I like to see this committee do something like we used to do for unity in community. I don't know if they are returning. I haven't heard anything, but I think that as a committee, if we want to get out there and let people know who we are, what we do, that would be a great opportunity. Maybe it's just once a year event. So maybe that's something that we can put on the agenda for future discussions.
Excellent. Okay.
And then the Monk Service Center will be having our Hmong National Memorial Day Festival on May 28, 29 out in the Winnebago County Park. So if DEI would like to have a booth out there, I'll be more than happy to provide you guys a free booth. Just get a sign out there and put it on your booth and just have a couple people there, just kind of observing people and maybe talking to people and answering questions. There'll be people from all over the state and outside of the state, so I know that we focus more locally. But that is something that we can do, just kind of being out there and observe other culture and, just talk to people and get some experience. Yeah, so I'd like to offer that.
Oh, no.
Yep.
That's good to know. Yep. That's
And
good.
yes, and I would love to invite the committee to
Right.
come out there and join our Saturday morning program. It's an opening program where we kick off with like ribbon cutting with the mayor and all the other local leaders and speakers. So I think that it's great for all of you guys to be out there and just kind of observe
Yes.
and be a part of
What's the
it.
date?
What?
What is the date?
May 28, 29. Those are the
Right.
two-day event, but the morning program is actually on Saturday, May 28, in the morning, like from 9 to noon.
Absolutely. If you have.
I would be able to attend with somebody else, but I'd be very interested in attending as well. I cannot set up the booth or anything, but I
If
can
you just want to
certainly
come out there as a guest, just like my other special guest, and just, be part of the opening, just be there and watch everybody, and then maybe even, go out to the soccer fields and watch soccer players and watch our topspin, special traditional games. I mean, those are things that we as a DEI committee, we should know about.
Right.
Because we're dealing with diversity here.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great opportunity.
Where would it be held? I apologize.
At the Winnebago County Park, yep.
I was wondering if it was going on this year, so it's great to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And when you have some more formal literature or things that if there's anything to share, please.
Yep.
You can just obviously send.
I can send out flyers to,
And you can
this
get it through
committee.
Michelle.
Yeah,
she'll
Michelle.
Michelle,
everybody.
and
Get
she'll
them to
just.
us, we'll
yep.
get them out.
Yep.
Disseminate,
That'd be
sure.
wonderful. Oh, no, I appreciate the invite and absolutely more than happy to stand up
Thank
there.
you.
Oh, gosh, that's great. It's a lot of fun. It's been a few years since I've been out there, so it's good. Wonderful. So anyone else have some events or activities, thank you very much, to share or bring to the table? I know there is a I Heart You event, just personally.
Yes.
I believe it's Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Really focusing on our opioid epidemic and just the ongoing realities that fentanyl continues to persist and present to us all. There was registration, I think you had to sign up and all of that. I know I'm attending, it sounds like maybe some of you all might be. But I will just say this, I would love to see it, I'll add this into our plan if we need to, but just formally, whatever the city can do to enhance our access and the distribution of Narcan, like, man, it needs to be in, if I see an AD, it needs to be in literally every public space. And the more I learn about fentanyl, and if you're not really up to speed on it, really go to the CDC, talk to the cops, talk to the first responders, because they will be the ones to tell you. If you're rifling through anybody that's got suspected anything, that stuff is so dangerous. It can also be aerosolized. And I'm learning this through clinicians that I work with, because we have, okay, I work with some of my personal line of work, it's something I learned from our docs. And like if somebody would happen to smoke something where it's laced and they exhale that, and you go into a public space or a bathroom, that can still be airborne, and you can have a secondary contact with it and cause an overdose. Fentanyl is so potent. It's something that I am just becoming increasingly alarmed about. So You know, I would like to see, I don't really know what our resources are necessarily. I try to tune in what's going on locally, but you kind of hit sort of a black box. It only goes so far since we don't have public. I go to the county's public health. I mean, you can try to find who's the working group, but it just sort of ends. So I would just really, just want to put that out there. There is a great event going on. I'm going to do whatever I can to pull in materials and share information, but it is something that, it's if you talk university, I mean, it's hitting too many youngsters, too many folks. One pill will kill you. I mean, people think it's whatever, Oxy or something else. It's not, you know, and most of it's manufactured by our cartels. Not our cartels, but the Mexican cartels that comes through. So I'll stop there, but I do think it's something, Ms. Funda. Bring it to attention. With that, though, I think if there's nothing else,
I
please,
have an idea for a future agenda item.
please.
Given the return to face-to-face meeting and that email we got about the rules for open meetings and face-to-face stuff, while I agree with you that it's nice to be face-to-face, I actually work in online teaching and learning and fully commuting work. So that's why I was kind of laughing when you were talking about that. But one thing I felt with reading that is it really strongly said to me, you have to be here face to face. And there's like, no, there might be exceptions to that rule, but you really, if they are, they're in really fine print, you can hardly see them. And that really is a problem for people with disabilities, particularly physical disabilities and various mental illnesses. You may have all noticed that I'm still wearing a mask. I also have anxiety, and I thought maybe I was mostly over it after the vacation I took, but I am still shaking a bit, and there was no way I was going maskless yet. So I'm able to come to this meeting, but I was a little nervous about it, and I would have personally have appreciated if we weren't face-to-face meetings quite yet, because this is actually my first, except for the travel, in-person event in 2 years. And I suspect that I'm probably not the only person in this situation. And I would like us to, and in the future, not even with the pandemic, there are other people who have anxiety or have a physical disability where they won't be able to come in person. And I would like to suggest that we make a resolution to the city that makes it more obvious, if it is legally allowed, that people can come to meetings via electronic means, whether that's to speak or as committee members. Because I think it is really, I mean, we've shown over the last 2 years that people can participate in committees via digital means. And I think it's really too bad that that it says like, no, you can't do that anymore. And particularly as a DEI committee, that we are telling people, no, you can't.
Well, that's an interesting point. Thank you, Anne Marie. No, and absolutely, you know, there was something that was always confounding to me early on. It needed to be all in person or all
Right.
virtual. We couldn't do a hybrid. That's, I guess, maybe something we can bring up perhaps in the future agenda and see really what is the challenges to that, because I don't disagree. I believe we were getting some ARPA money or something for broadband, and it has telecommunication capabilities, so maybe that's something that we'll see. But no, I appreciate you bringing it up, not only for our disabled and folks with mental illnesses and other issues that might prevent them from engaging face to face. Yes, the isolation is definitely important.
Just so you know, the number one, we're governed by the Americans with Disabilities Act, and so that's something that we are required to provide reasonable accommodations. And at the very bottom of the first page of our agenda, it says, if anyone requires other reasonable accommodations. It's pretty generic, but please contact Human Resources. And the council has said two things already. Number one, this is staff because it's ADA. We're required, if somebody says this is this is my limitation, we have to give them the ability to participate. And so that's not a matter of choice for us, it's a matter of what we can do to assist. So we will accommodate people in that regard. And then the council also said if there's something to the benefit of for the benefit of the city, not necessarily the benefit of the individual, aside from ADA, because ADA is the law. We've got to do that. And we've prepared ourselves that if somebody calls, we've improved, the technology's improved dramatically in the last 2 years, and people's comfort. We can do all that. The council also said we can, if it's for the benefit of the city, if we needed somebody's participation on a board or commission to make it happen, to get a quorum, for example, we will make that accommodation to serve that person. If Alonzo had needed to participate tonight remotely, which we thought he might, we can do that already. So there's some certain things, but would you like it on in terms of, how do you want it worded, to put on next agenda?
Are you looking for an acknowledgement that we recognize that there's people who, regardless of the pandemic, have limitations as to?
That's such,
No, and I understand that part, but
yeah.
so I guess it would be nice to put that out there in some kind of formal way that the committee is open to that, so people are welcome and they can.
The long-term way is get into your
Yeah.
plan and say, as far as communication goes, you got to do that to more effectively communicate.
As
And
part of
that's-
your recommendations, as part of your advising.
And, yeah, and not to say if there's an order, but I guess to that point, Anne Marie, I think, again, if we start to look at how people access this committee, that speaks right to what you're talking about.
Right,
Not only
well,
our
and
committee
I want
members,
it
but also
bigger
the
than our
public.
committee also.
Right, that's what I'm
so.
saying, our committee members, but also the public, I mean, it applies.
Well, no, other city committees and the city council and such too, because that document that we got was for every city
Yes, it
commission,
did.
council, and the board.
I understand you're talking about it applying to
You're right.
all boards and
right.
commissions.
And
Yeah, and
that's a generic statement that everybody sees, but
they don't necessarily know what it means.
ADA is restricted to certain types of disabilities, and you have to actually be certified. And there's a lot of things. Some people are like, well, that wouldn't really count for me because I'm not. And then they'll, self-select themselves out of it.
Any ideas and thoughts and suggestions that you want to bring to the table and have for advisement? I think we're certainly open to it, and I hear you. I mean, it's very
Yeah, I'm-
nuanced, and very personal in so many ways, and but yes.
I could write something up for next week. It was something I thought of while I was sitting here.
Yeah, I mean, and that's how some of our former past resolutions have begun. Somebody that starts with an idea, a committee member maybe starts drafting something, and then we can, if you want, you can bring it to the table and things of that nature. If we have more formal discussion, and if you want us to move ahead with more of a formal resolution or something of that nature, but, and then it goes for all of us. Well, anyhow, no, thank you very much. Thanks for coming and joining. Hope it was entertaining and not enlightening.
So much fun.
Aaron, with that, I would motion to adjourn.
Second.
I'll move to adjourn.
Okay, Aaron.
Second. Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I thought I heard a second.